Yes.
So we do the beat rush.
Oh, that's
We do
lethal.
this, and then and then we get this blocker out of the way. So we're looking at 14 flat. Party time! Party time!
Well, you're dead.
So then we'll tap out for Boon of the Wishgiver thing.
He's got priority at this point. If he plays something, there we go. Oh, that's glorious.
That's a lot of damage.
Minus 34.
And welcome back to coverage here of the Strixhaven Championship. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. It's our pleasure to bring coverage of the championship match coming up. Paul, let's get right down to business here. Talking about the lists that these two players have for their Jeskai Turns decks, what stands out to you about what we've seen, prior in the tournament to now?
Yeah, so, the big story, I think, coming into top 8 was the really cool Nezahal tech that we saw in a lot of these Jeskai Turn sideboards. But guess what? At the end of the day, there are no Nezahals anymore in either of these lists. So a lot of it just kind of comes down to, these specific players' configurations of cards. And I want to say that Sam, the biggest edge that he's going to have coming into this is Game 1. Because Game 1 is where he chose to just not play any removal at all. There is no Anger of the Gods. There's no Scorching Dragonfire. He's actually choosing to play 2 copies of Shark Typhoon instead. So, while this is a mirror and most of the cards are the same, Sam does have just a little bit extra in the main that allows him to put a little extra pressure on John to react to those Shark tokens.
It's funny because they run for those Shark Typhoons in the board, and he's already got a couple in the main. Now, with no Nezahals, what does it look like to win a game, particularly post-sideboard? I'll remind you, by the way, we're playing best 2 out of 3 matches here to determine our champion, so we could see a lot of sideboarded games today. We kind of got used to seeing Nezahal hit and go, okay, well, that's kind of it. That's not the case here. What does a win look like?
Yeah, so a win in this type of matchup really looks very similar to kind of what you would expect in a traditional control mirror. So what that means is both players looking to develop their draws, hit their land drops, and ultimately find those uncounterable effects. So we're talking about Shark Typhoons, commence the endgames. The person who will typically draw more copies of those cards will be the one who kind of comes out on top.
Okay, well, that is what we're looking forward to. We have John Girardeau versus Sam Pardee all set to go in the feature. Again, we're playing best 2 out of 3 matches. Sam said he was going to grab some lunch and go for a walk because he made his way through the upper part of the bracket, and that means he's kind of on easy mode. He's going to be well rested and ready to go. And his opponent on the other side, the only thing he could really muster from his interview after making top 8 last night was, I got to go to bed. He got really tired, and it looks like he's all ready to go this time, though. High energy mode here for John.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, John is from France, and by the time he took that interview, I mean, it had to have been like 3 or 4 in the morning for
Totally,
him.
yeah. And he played a hard day, but he looks refreshed and ready to go here. In fact, both of them do. Let's get underway, Paul. What do the opening hands look like for our players?
Nothing resembling a combo, at least from John's side of the battlefield. The nice thing about him, though, is the fact that he does have multiple lands, and he also has lots of ways to make treasure. So he's going to be the one who's going to have a bit of a mana advantage, at least early on. We'll see if he can actually somehow translate that mana advantage into actually being able to resolve a key spell.
All right, well, those pair of Magma Opus will sit in hand for the moment here for John, though it is land go from Sam Pardee, so we're going to see one of those get cashed in for a treasure token, then untap, play a land.
Yeah, as you can see here with John, I mean, he's already got a treasure in play, and then he also has that Prismari command to even put more cards, more permanents onto the battlefield that generate mana. This would allow him to potentially set up a turn where he can go for a combo with Memory Lapse backup. Of course, right now, pretty far away from that.
That's right. Sam Pardee is going to cycle a Raugrin Triumph on end step, draw his card for the turn, play a land, and say, your move. Right back over to you, my friend.
Yeah, and he does have, the ability to, he does have Indomitable Creativity and Memory Lapse, right? So now he's kind of got he will have a chance later to go Creativity with Counterspell backup. Just important for him to actually find a way to make a creature.
Wow, just as you say it here, Paul, that's Dwarven Mine off the top of the library. Now, in order for him to cast it and have memory lapse back up, he would need an additional mana source. So he's going to play a Fabled Passage here first, but next turn, he'll be ready to go.
He will be. But the problem with just going for it in this matchup is more often than not, your opponent will at least have one way to interact with you to disrupt your combo, right? They're going to have a Prismari command. They're going to have a memory lapse. And in that situation, if you fail on resolving your combo, it is so likely for your opponent to turn it around on you and combo F themselves. So oftentimes the first person to flinch, the first person to kind of go for it, it typically won't end up working out too well for them.
Yeah, particularly in this case because John has the extra 2 treasure tokens, which give him access to, as you're saying, multiple ways potentially to deal with the combo, and that's going to make life a bit of a headache here for Sam Pardee.
Right.
Even though if you take a look at the hand right now from John, it is only memory lapse to interact directly, but there's so many cards he can see between Brainstorm and Curate that he could easily find another way to interact
Well,
there.
keep in mind, that's the one thing that you have to be mindful of in this matchup. None of the counter spells are hard counters, right? Memory Lapse just puts the card back on top. So when you look at a card like Memory Lapse in John Girardot's hands, given the fact that he has a Curate and a Brainstorm in his hand, it's like he has 2 Memory Lapses, right? If Sam goes for the combo here, goes Indomitable Creativity with Memory Lapse backup, John Girardot memory lapses the Indomitable Creativity. Sam memory lapses you back. You let that resolve, Brainstorm, then lapse again.
Right. Here's the Dwarven Mine, but again with, 4, 5, 7 mana sitting on the other side, Sam Pardee just can't put himself in a position to be that first player to flinch, so he's going to have to pass the turn back. Curate on end step here from John. He sees another Dwarven Mine as well as a Raugrin Triumph. Now, he can pick how he wants to order these and which ones he wants. It looks like he's going to take the Dwarven Mine, but pass on the other land there. Ooh, Mythic Mastery into hand here as well. Things starting to get interesting from John's perspective.
John's like, hey, look, I will offer this trade. I do not have a creativity, so I would be more than happy to get your 1/1 off the battlefield here. And as you see from John's side, slowly creeping up to that 8 mana, which is really, really key because at that point, John can put pressure on Sam Pardee and go, hey, look, end of turn, Magma Opus, deal, right? And the only thing Sam can really do is memory lapse. And eventually, the Magma Opus is either going to resolve or you're going to be forced to kind of combo off yourself.
Right, and if it's not a Magma Opus that resolves, let's say that it is memory lapse, and Sam can say, well, at least I got the 2 treasures out, so you can't just immediately go for another Magma Opus. Well, there's still the combo potential there too. So it looks like Sam's just going to run out a feeler spell here, a Time Warp. And this is just like, hey, John, what do you want to do about it? You know, this isn't a particularly powerful moment to fire a Time Warp off. It's getting him a card, a land drop, and maybe a point of damage in. But it's a tester. It does say, hey, do you want to start fighting yet? Because, you know, the other thing is John can interpret this as a little bit of desperation, perhaps a missed land drop coming or something from Sam Pardee. He's going to go for the lapse, but we're going to see the land drop after.
Right, and Sam's still keeping a memory lapse up for himself to potentially disrupt anything that John's looking to do here.
That's right. Sam, of course, being very careful to make sure that he would always have that second mana. If he is forced to use it, he'll lose the Time Warp. He'll have to shuffle it away, but yeah, I can think of worse things than that.
And now let's see here. Does John have the ability to go Time Warp? He could go Time Warp, Mizzix's Mastery, Time Warp, but that's not going to get him too far.
Similar to Sam's situation.
Right. But, I mean, maybe he still sees that as a value play, and it's still something that he could consider. I doubt that he's just going to go for an Overload here, as a memory lapse would just be a little too devastating here, I believe.
Yeah, that's also another thing to consider, that is if John is trying to work towards an overloaded Mizzix's Mastery, getting all of these Time Warps and Opuses into the yard is a benefit.
Yeah, and it looks like he's going to lead with a Time Warp here, just to see if maybe Sam's going to fire off a lapse. And Sam, on the flip side, choosing to be patient, going, you know what, you have plenty of mana. I'm just going to counter the actual spell that matters. And which is really great, given that what we see right here, John needs to probably find, if John can find a memory lapse, that would be fantastic. But if he doesn't, I mean, you know, you're not going to be able to safely overload that Mizzix's Mastery into 2 open mana.
Wow, look at this curate, another time warp and another mastery. He might be able to just overwhelm the resources of Sam Pardee over the next turn or two.
Right, but so if John goes for... Oh, well, John has a bunch of treasures, so he could still represent a memory lapse. I was going to say if John had... You spent all of his mana to tap out, and that would be the window for Sam to just fire off memory lapse and then just try to chain together a bunch of turns in a row, because he's got the time warp on top, time warp in hand, couple of masteries, and that creativity.
Okay, John's going to go for yet another time warp here.
I mean, not a whole lot has changed.
Yeah, I guess the difference is there's just 3 treasures now for John.
Right, which would still give him the mana to cast Memory Lapse if Sam chose to try to go off next turn.
Right, in fact, if he only had to sack 2 treasures, it would guarantee that he still had the 8 mana.
Now, if
regardless
Sam
of his
lapses
draw
this,
step.
John could just go Dwarven Mine, Mizzix's Mastery, Time Warp, but then he's just out of gas completely, right?
Yes. Yeah,
And
he
so-
has to be leaning on that mastery for overload at some point, right?
So Sam recognizing this, just saying, hey, nothing's changed. I'm just going to let this resolve. Again, you have 1 card in hand. I will just counter the relevant thing that you draw or try to cast.
Paul, why didn't you tell me this was going to be a dwarf tribal aggro matchup? You left that off the table, but
when you were talking about the keys to the matchup, I might have missed that one.
You overlooked
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see that by virtue of 3 versus 1, John's winning.
I wonder if John is just going to go for... Is he just not going to overload and, I don't know, try to take 2, just a turn here?
I think he is.
I mean, I don't know if Dwarf Beats is going to get there, but I mean, look, if you think about it, right? If you Time Warp here, you can hit for 3, put him down to 7.
Then another.
Yeah, then another. I mean, it just gives you more cards to find. Is Sam going to finally counter this one?
He is. He's decided, look, okay, I got enough information that you don't have anything else going on here, and I'm going to counter it. And this is going to get tricky business here for
Yeah.
Sam Pardee. What does he have? 7 mana right now? So we can go Time Warp and then try to resolve an overloaded mastery of his own if he
Off
can
the
hit
top?
a land?
Or hit a Velomachus? I mean, he can try to go for Magma Opus and draw some answers, right? Draw some memory lapses here to find a way to interact.
Right.
I think that's probably his best line here.
2 cards in the hand.
Yeah.
Let's see if he can find something.
And this shuts off Indomitable Creativity.
Right?
Needs a memory lapse.
Oh, he found Sweltering Suns and Mizzix's Mastery number 3. So Sam gets to have some fun here.
Sam's going to take some turns here, right?
Can he
We're gonna
overload a mastery yet? Not quite, right?
He can overload the mastery, but he's waiting to first cast this time warp. Next turn, he's gonna overload mastery. He's gonna go for it here. He's gonna die. He's dead on board. So you have to go for it, and we'll see how many, what we can do. Unclear. Wait, exactly what he's got in the graveyard.
Okay, well, it looks like he's gonna go for Mizzix's Mastery on just one of the time warps here, and then overload the other.
Right. Given that he
gets
has
to see more
2,
cards.
given that he has 2, this is the same thing.
There's Velomachus Lorehold.
Oh, jeez, this
is getting interesting. Does he have a white mana source yet?
The Triome.
Oh, does he have a land drop for the turn?
I believe. Maybe he does not.
I felt like he didn't.
Yeah, his graveyard actually. There's not a whole lot of
doesn't.
cards in his graveyard.
Yeah, we saw the 2 time warps, but critically no Magma Opus.
Right, but he can. He does have the land drop here.
Okay.
All right.
So it's all in on Velomachus. Oh,
Yeah.
there's a Mizzix Mastery.
And he's going for the Velomachus this turn. And if he hits a time warp or a Mizzix's Mastery, that'll be the extra turn. And then I mean he should probably have enough to kind of take it down.
And there's a
Time
time
warp.
warp right in the middle for Sam Pardee.
Wow, look at the sigh.
Huge sigh of relief. He only had a couple
Jeez.
left in the deck. John Girardeau is shaking his head. He's like, no, don't fall apart.
So close. Oh,
And another time warp off the top
Yeah.
is enough.
That should do it.
Wow, what a find there for Sam Pardee. He was so close to being dead. Now he's going to stockpile turns.
He's just casting this now to speed things up to get the concession right away.
Right, because now he'll have this turn for 5, plus another, it's 15 damage.
15 damage.
And that's enough to get the job done here.
I appreciate that Sam's trying to close this out quicker.
Yeah, hey, this is a long match, set of matches potentially that these players have in front of them, so you can see why he'd want to do that.
And now we have 3 turns on the stack here.
All right. John's content to just take a bunch of damage. And, you know, fine. That's nothing wrong with that. Sam Pardee just goes through the motions here. Nothing like having 3 turns in the bank with your 5/5 flyer out. And it looks like John is going to pack him in here, I think.
I like the Andrea Mingucci approach, where just scoop as quickly as possible and save yourself the mental anguish.
Well, boy, that was about as close as it gets from Sam Pardee's perspective, though. My goodness sakes. He knew he needed a hit on that one attack step with Velomachus, found the time warp, got the job done.
Yeah, and really, really great patience exhibited by Sam there, recognizing that, hey, those time warps are really not that important at this point, you know? Your hand is, if your hand is Mizzix's Mastery, that's the card that I want to get.
Really impressive. And then, you know, but then he was patient, but he did ultimately fire off his memory lapse at the moment that it was clear that there wasn't anything better going on over there for John, and gave himself that window, that opening. Now, John, you know, was able to fight back with the Magma Opus and make life difficult for Pardee, but Velomachus did Velomachus things, and he picked up game number 1. If you're just tuning in, welcome. It's great to have you along. We're here in the championship match. This is the best 2 out of 3 matches, and you are here for the first one. In fact, you've only missed 1 game, so you're right on time. It's Sam Pardee up a game over John Girardeau of France, and it's a mirror match. Not a 75 card mirror. It's pretty close, though.
Yeah, and as you can see, I mean, both players boarding almost exactly the same way here, right? You see the combo being boarded out. You see both players shaving on a time warp. And you see, of course, all those uncounterable ways to put creatures on the battlefield in Commence the Endgame, Shark Typhoon, and also because recognizing that that is the most important element of the matchup, also bringing in bounce spells. Sam Pardee with access to Perilous Voyage in his sideboard, and John Girardeau with Into the Royal and Blink of an Eye in his sideboard as ways to bounce tokens. Now, Perilous Voyage, for 2 mana, it's a more efficient card, right? You get to scry right away. However, in this matchup where, you know, the games are going to go a little bit longer, especially in the post-boarded games, I have to favor Blink of an Eye and Into the Royal there, because you get to basically break even with all of those cycled Shark Typhoons by drawing a card when you bounce those sharks.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing to do, right? We're used to Shark Typhoon just kind of being a 2-for-1 every time. But, you can actually do it here. All right, that was a quick mulligan, I think, for Sam. It was. And he's going to bin a Shark Typhoon, keep a 3-lander with Magma Opus Mastery, and another Shark Typhoon for John.
This is really interesting. I think we've seen this before.
Oh, you're
right.
But
I believe John chose to draw
this
matchup.
He did. He decided to go on the draw. And it really paid here, at least in the early stages of this game, in that Sam had to mulligan as well, so it's kind of double punishing.
And we've heard Cedric refer to this already, but this is something that former Magic Pro Guillaume Wafotapa, Hall of Famer, known to do in control mirrors, right? And I wonder if John is taking a little page out of the French Hall of Famer's book here and kind of going with the same strategy of, you know what, this is a control matchup after sideboard. I want that extra card.
That's interesting. And we're going to see a Shark Typhoon for 1 here from Pardee. This is a little bit of desperation. He's going to miss a land drop if he doesn't find one here off of the cycle.
But the nice part about this is, you know, that it's extremely likely that your opponent boarded out the combo. So you can make plays like this now. You can main phase tap out because you're not afraid that your opponent's going to go Dwarven Mine into the combo, right? Because of the existence of Fry, it's just so hard for you to reliably expect that this combo is going to kind of take you to victory. So more often than not, that's going to be a liability.
That's right. You know, you'd think there might be some gamesmanship there where you could say like, well, maybe you don't bring in, you know, like a kind of jockeying, but they just always bring in the fry anyway, so you can't really get around it.
Yeah.
Because it has utilities outside of killing Velomachus.
Right, that's the thing. You bring in the fry. I mean, of course, there's always that small chance that they just kept some of the combo, right? And they have a Velomachus, in which case fry is great. At the same time, really the key to the matchup after sideboard are those 4 copies of Shark Typhoon. So you just need to make sure you have some answers to that.
Speaking of Shark Typhoon, little baby shark's going to get him for 1. Down to 17 goes John. But he has a dwarf to crack back and take first blood here from Sam Pardee. Down to 19 he goes.
And yeah, these extra cards working out nicely for John increases the chances that you're not going to miss a land drop, right? You get to see an extra card. Sam, I believe, has already missed a land drop, despite as he went first, and now he's just playing his 5th land.
Yeah, that's right. He didn't miss a land drop on that turn where he cycled the shark, but the next turn he drew the mastery and did. And he's just blasting off here. He's just going to go for a time warp.
Yeah, but cannot pass down this mana exchange, right?
1 for 5 is
one
pretty tough to turn
5
down. Yeah. And we might see a chain of time warps here from John as well.
The thing
He's
is,
got a couple in hand.
It's weird. He might go for it, but these time warps really won't be doing a whole lot. He might just be chaining them off just to try to find some lands.
Yeah, I mean, this is a control mirror, right? Getting ahead
Yeah.
on land drops can be really big, and he could take up to 3 turns in a row here if he really wanted. He also, though, has to consider doing this after commence the end game. If he can get a token on the battlefield and then take a bunch of turns, that can just be the game.
Yeah, and look at this. He's not interested in actually casting the time warps. The important thing is just to make sure you fill up your graveyard with them so that the true win condition of this deck can show itself, which is Mizzix's Mastery. Overload that Mizzix's Mastery with multiple Mystical Dispute backup. That's a nice looking way to victory.
I mean, that's aggressive, though, Paul. Like, you know another way to fill up your graveyard with time warps? Cast them. Your opponent's tapped out. Just go cast it. You get 2 in your yard, but you give yourself the chance to hit land drops or, you know, get ahead a little on damage or any other number of things. That was aggro.
That was, however, I think John really, really valuing those Mystical Disputes and also the Mizzix's Mastery, which is effectively a time warp, right? If you really wanted to, you can cash that in for a time warp. He wants to hit his land drops, and he really wants to just cast, you know, these commence the end games and Shark Typhoons, and have counter magic up for whatever Sam might be trying to do.
Right. Yeah, and you know that Mizzix's Mastery can be more than a time warp, right? It can be 2, 3 time warps if you can get it overloaded. Here comes commence the end game. And the last time we saw this happen from John, that's exactly what it did. The endgame commenced very quickly there. It was a big swing in his direction as Sperling looked to be in an okay position and found himself dead on the next attack step.
You know what I would really love to see here from John?
What's
I
that?
want to see a cycled Shark Typhoon for 6. I know it's going to eat up a treasure, but it does allow you to play around Fry.
Oh, yeah. Great point, Paul. Let's see what happens. First things first, Prismari command here from Sam Pardee. He wants a treasure token and some cards. And he sees Brainstorm and a Perilous Voyage. So the Voyage gives him an answer. And look, it looks like he might get rid of the Fry here anyway, with no targets in sight currently.
Yeah, and Perilous Voyage is big. I mean, there is a lot of pressure here just from that 5/5 token alone.
Ooh, conditional spells going away here for Pardee. Some of his answers. He does have that Voyage, though. It looks like he's considering if he'd like to run into a card like Mystical Dispute with his Perilous Voyage, decides against it.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations where pretty soon you might see Sam just go for an overloaded Mizzix's Mastery just because of how behind he's going to be on board. Especially with this Shark Typhoon that's going to be cycled. The thing is, Sam discarded a Fry, but I still wouldn't be surprised if John went for the 6/6 Shark Typhoon, just because there are 2 Frys in the deck.
Right, and in fact, discarding a Fry might make you even think it's more likely that Sam has one
Right.
because he has a backup. But he's
Oh,
going to go for the 5.
Mana. I wonder if
Sam considering if the time is right here to get that shark out of here, and it is. He'll get the scry 2 as well.
I wonder if John is considering... Oh no, this is resolving. I was wondering if he wanted to consider Mystical Dispute just to try to tap him out, but it looks like he's happier just maybe potentially going for Dispute with all the counterspell backup.
Okay, and back over to John. Shark took a little flight. He's not coming back, but it's still 6 damage, 2-turn clock here cracking in from John.
Yeah, and John's just got full control at this point, right?
He really does.
2 lapses plus the Dispute, and he's the one with the lethal attacker next turn. Sam's just got a mountain of cards that he needs to fight through, and I just don't see him being able to kind of find a way out here. I mean, perhaps finding a Shark Typhoon, right? Or just to kind of play it out. But if you do, that's going to kind of force you to tap out too.
And it looks like John's just going to go for it right here. Fire off Mizzix's Mastery on a Time Warp that would let him attack for lethal if Sam can't find anything.
Yeah, and that should
And he couldn't find anything. That's game number 2 going to John Girardeau as he picks up the win in impressive fashion. 2 things that stood out there were the mulligan from Sam, but more importantly, I'm going to put you on the play from John. And, you know, it was a game of raw cards that time, and John deciding to be on the draw really paid for him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We talk about land drops, but I really don't want to understate this. It is so important in this matchup to keep hitting them, right? Being on the draw gives you that extra card and allows you to make those bigger sharks potentially because you're going to have more lands naturally. I'm curious to see if Sam's going to go with the same strategy here, seeing how successful it was for John in game 2. Nope.
He's playing. He's taking the draw. He says, "I'll take that draw. Thank you very much." Excuse me, that play. Thank you very much. All right, land go here from Sam. This is game 3 between these two in our opening match. We do have a best 2 out of 3 matches here, so regardless of how this one goes, we'll have more Magic for you today. Thanks so much for joining us. Land number 2 here so that this Magma Opus can get turned into a treasure.
Much better start here for Sam Pardee.
Yeah, this actually looks quite strong. He can brainstorm here.
Yeah, probably wants to hide those time warps. Just looking for sharks. Looking for
Shark
end
hunting.
games.
Trying to find one. He also has to consider if he'd like to use the Fabled Passage to augment the top of his library. Are there cards that he just outright doesn't want here?
It's possible he doesn't really want the Prismari command because the looting effect is not going to be that strong. Like the way that his hand currently is, he kind of likes most of the cards in there, right? So the looting's just not going to accomplish a whole lot. Ooh, discarding a land is a little dicey.
All right.
Or
he must be planning on drawing it.
Yeah, right. That's right. He just wants to keep it all.
Yeah, and then just getting rid of the command via Fabled Passage. That's what we see now.
And is he just... Okay.
He's just going to go for Magma Opus here.
Well, he's got Dispute backup here. Wow.
Picking a little fight here is Sam Pardee. And taking a look at the hand, it's going to work.
Yeah, and he's going, look, check it out. I got to do this because I'm on the play.
Yeah, there are benefits to being on the play. And maybe this just puts him way ahead. Certainly going to put him ahead on board. It's going to get him the cards he needs.
Now, John will have an answer to the 4/4, right? He does have the Blink of an Eye. So he's going to lose the counter ward. This is going to eat Sam Pardee's counterspell. But he can use the Blink of an Eye to get the 4/4 off the battlefield, which means Sam's just going to draw 2 cards, which is, of course, very good. But at the very least, there is not a giant threat that John will be overly concerned about.
Curious if John uses the Blink of an Eye right now. Like, does he just need to be mana efficient and just fire it off? Yeah, he does, because He's not going to get to pay the kicker on it, so that's another card out of hand here. That worked out really well for Sam.
Yeah, definitely. But you know, now we're kind of starting over again, right? Because now when you're looking at Sam's side of the battlefield, I mean, he doesn't have, you know, we're kind of back to the, all right, play my lands and kind of sculpt my hand scenario.
Yep, and once again, value time warps are going on the stack for our players here. This time it's Sam Pardee. And it's going to resolve. He finds a memory lapse. And we're back to dwarf tribal beatdowns, Paul. It's happening again. This time, though, John's not going to engage in battle here. It's going to see a brainstorm now for Sam. He's hitting his land drops, no problem. There's a Shark Typhoon and a Commence the End game, Paul.
Yeah, that was big. And now Sam's going to be able to make a 3/3 Shark, very key, as it does allow you to dodge the command. And then he can follow that up with a Commence the End game. John needs to dig. John needs to dig through a lot of cards here. He needs to find answers to these tokens while also making sure that he doesn't fall behind on these land drops.
Yeah, he's got some cards in hand that just aren't doing much right now. The Time Warp, even the Mastery, to a certain extent, just aren't really adding to the board or getting him an advantage that he needs right now. He's going to get rid of the Warp, keep the Mastery, and see what happens here off of a Brainstorm. This is all on Sam Pardee's end step, so we could still see some fireworks here from John. He finds a Shark Typhoon of his own, and there's also a Magma Opus for down the line.
Right, in conjunction with that Mizzix's Mastery in his hand.
Right, okay. That wasn't too bad. John's starting to make progress here with these pair of Shark Typhoons. In the meantime, though, it's just going to be Dwarven Mine go from him as we see a Shark for 3 hit the battlefield here for Pardee. This will get him that Steam Vents back into hand. And once again, he can commence the beatdowns, as it were. In comes the team.
And Sam content with potentially trading off that 1/1 with a Shark from John's side.
Okay, and there it is, a tap land here, but critically 6 mana left over.
Do we
just
make a 4/4?
enough for commence.
Nope, he likes the mana.
Yeah, he continually decides to save his treasures over a slightly bigger Shark, even if the bigger Shark matters. Like it would here, it would, you know, hold off the opposing Shark, for example. But here we go. Commence the end game now for Sam Pardee. This is going to be a 5/5 zombie army, and he finds another Commence.
Ooh.
I'll tell you who's not going to get tricked by that. That's John Girardeau. He knows how this interaction works. Remember, if you amass again, it'll just pile on more counters onto the amass token you've already got. And John's just going to trade off his Shark while chump blocking on the ground. And with that memory lapse in hand, Sam Pardee looks like he's in pretty good shape here.
Yeah, and now we see the Shark Typhoon. It's really interesting. We've seen John refusing to sacrifice that token. Even now, facing up against the 5/5 Commence the Endgame token, still choosing not to make that Shark into a 5/5.
I'm surprised. He doesn't have an answer for the 5/5 now.
Well, he does now because he did find Commence the Endgame. He did, yeah, and that'll be a 6/6. But oh, and look at this. Sam just going for it here. It's like, hey, if you got a counter, you got a counter. But I am playing this Magma Opus.
Right, and this goes back to what you talked about before, Paul, with regards to memory lapse. Yes, it buys you the time, but he will simply redraw the Magma Opus, and he can just overwhelm. These are not hard counters.
Right, and this Commence the Endgame could add 6 power to the 5/5 that's in place. So that would be nearly lethal.
Yeah, that's almost lethal. And critically here as well, John does not have access to his own Commence the Endgame anymore.
And look at Sam considering whether or not he wants to just get in for 11. But I think he would rather just keep up instant speed Magma Opus here.
Yeah, this is him putting his opponent in check over and over again. He's just going to keep putting Magma Opus on the stack and forcing John to react. If John doesn't, well, then Sam's going to have an overwhelming advantage. And if John does, it makes his life difficult. It's taxing him mana, and it's making him find answers for it. Meanwhile, he's falling behind pretty desperately here with that 5-5 taking huge chunks out of his life total.
This is really interesting. Commence the endgame, while it is a good card, Mystical Dispute might be even better because Sam has already shown that he wants to go for an end of turn Magma Opus, and the Mystical Dispute would just be a 1-mana counter to that card.
Yeah, that's right. And remember, John already has a Commence in the hand as well. Having 2 of them, well, at least in the near future, isn't going to help him out. But there they are. He has the Mystical Dispute, and he also has the Commence. You also saw Magma Opus go into the yard there to create another option here on a treasure.
Yeah, so this is getting disputed, and keep in mind, John can still cast Commence the Endgame here. He does have those treasures in play.
That's right.
And it cannot be countered. So that Memory Lapse won't necessarily get it done here. But Sam does have a Commence the Endgame here. So when he draws for his turn, he can that token can become a 9/9.
Right.
If he casts Commence the Endgame.
So this makes life really difficult for John.
Absolutely.
There's a Mystical Dispute. Go ahead.
Because if John goes for Commence the Endgame here and does a double block, that's just 8 power and 8 toughness, right? Commence the Endgame is going to make a 4/4 here.
Yeah, that's true. So it's actually just 1 short.
So this double block is going to be
devastating.
Brutal.
Yes.
Double block?
Oh, he is double blocking. And here comes the combat trick of the century for Sam Pardee in the form of Commence the Endgame to crush the life. Now, what are we looking at for John here? We see Mizzix's Mastery in hand. 2 Memory Lapse for Sam Pardee? Okay, well, never mind.
Yeah, so I think the line here is, first, play a Dwarven Mine. That gives you a chump blocker, which is nice. And probably maybe just go for Commence the Endgame, right? That's uncounterable, puts more threats on the battlefield, and potentially draws you some counter magic to hopefully resolve Mizzix's Mastery.
Yeah, we are not done here just yet.
Never mind.
Oh, he's going to go for the full overload here on Mizzix's Mastery, but it's not going to work. Now, Sam could have won this turn if he found a way to get that 1/1 out of the way. He did not. And that means that another top deck here for John.
And I wonder if John's going to go for the overload again, or this time guarantee that he has a blocker at least with Commence the Endgame.
Because this is different. He doesn't have the 1/1 now. So if the Mastery gets lapsed, it's GG.
Yeah, this is just game if he goes for the Mizzix's Mastery.
And he realizes it too. He knows this is a critical juncture in this opening game, or this opening match, excuse me, of our championship match. And if he goes for it all and misses, it's done. And now Sam's sitting over there like, go for it, buddy. The water's nice and warm.
I got 2 lapses and a 10-10.
Come on in. What could go wrong? It's fine. You do have to wonder, though, because John would buy himself 2 cards plus a chump block if there's no way to get that token out of the way before combat. He's really facing a tough judgment call here.
Right. Given what we know, if he goes for Commence the Endgame, he does get a blocker, and he does need to find 2 relevant threats that Sam deems worthy of memory lapsing to try and resolve this Mizzix's Mastery. But of course, Sam knows about them. Oh, well, that's a Shark Typhoon, so.
Not bad. Here comes Commence the Endgame. This will provide a blocker.
That's not what you wanted to see.
Down to 4, a land and a go. But as you said, Paul, this is now a way for Sam to create an additional lethal, uncounterable threat. And he has the double lapse that he can cast in addition to that. There's no way out here for John now.
Sam's got this one locked up.
Wow. What a great opening match here between these 2 players. There's the memory lapse to seal the deal, and a good game from John Girardeau, and Sam Pardee picks up the first match here in our championship match. He is 1 match away from the trophy.
And I will say, after seeing both of those games play out, I don't know. Play or draw? I'm not sure. Flip a coin? Maybe?
Play.
Who knows? Play?
Play.
Play? All right,
I
we'll
like
go
play.
with play.
Yeah.
I mean, because look at what Sam was able to do. By going first, he was able to leverage that mana advantage, had that treasure in play, to resolve a critical spell early with counterspell backup, and John was just too far behind from that point.
Right, in a world with 1 mana and 2 mana counters and the ability to cast 8 mana spells for only 4, I want to try to get one of those going. We've seen that the players that can start generating advantage and then building off of it are often the ones who have enough resources late game to get the job done. In this case, that was Sam Pardee. He's up a match. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, though, we'll have the second match. We'll see you in just a bit. And welcome back to coverage here of the Strixhaven Championship. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Chion. Thanks so much for coming along. We are one match down here on our championship match, and that first one went to Sam Pardee. John Girardeau sitting across from him. Now, these players are playing very similar lists, and as I mentioned before, Paul, we're playing best 2 out of 3 matches. That means we kind of reset here and go back to our main deck configurations for this opener.
Yeah, and can't imagine John's going to keep that hand, as it only had 1 land. This one looks a lot better.
What does Sam do? 4, 4. Is he rooting for him to go to 4 here?
I believe that's what that was.
Well, he got pretty close. Got him down to 5.
I mean, all things considered, John's hand isn't the worst for a mold of 5. You know, got a land, got the curate, can make a treasure off the Magma Opus.
Yeah, one of the quickest ways to get right back in the game after a mulligan is to go for Mizzix's Mastery on a Magma Opus to get those cards as soon as you can do it.
But Sam's hand also looks fantastic here. Not especially scared of a combo here. He's got both Memory Lapse and Prismari Command. Not a ton of ways to disrupt the combo here, but you know, there are 8 cards that are relevant, right? You have the 4 lapses and the command, so nice to have both. And additionally, the key card here that Sam has access to game 1 that John only has in the sideboard, Shark Typhoon.
I just mentioned this play. He has it at his disposal now. Mizzix's Mastery with Magma Opus in the yard. Does he feel that he needs to go for it? He has a Memory Lapse in hand, but he won't be able to cast it if he casts Mizzix's Mastery here.
Right, it's rough because if Sam has the combo, if he goes Prismari Command into Creativity, he just lets this resolve and tries to win, but
it looks
Sam,
like he's... Yeah, he does have the opportunity to Prismari Command here, but he's just going to go for the lapse.
Right, but your opponent mulled the 5.
Right.
Like, you lapse this, and they just have probably nothing, right?
Right, and it's important to note, you mentioned this rules interaction in the last game, but it's true here as well. That doesn't go back on top of the library. It's just gone.
Exactly. No, an additional mastery off the top is not going to let you get another crack at that opus.
That's right. So it's going to be a brainstorm for John. Now, you know, cards like Curate and Brainstorm are all fine and dandy. They help out, but they are not ways to accrue actual card advantage. And when you're down as many cards as John is, that's what you need to see.
Yeah, and this Shark Typhoon's going to do some work here.
Yep.
And Sam not choosing, you know, we've seen a lot of players in this matchup choose to be pretty aggressive with the Prismari Command, and you would think that Sam would want to fire off Prismari Command to filter through some of those lands and make a treasure, but actually instead opting to keep it in hand and perhaps have it as an option to disrupt the potential combo. John, with so few resources, might feel compelled to just kind of go for it, and Sam wants to have the answer for that.
Right, we've already seen one act of desperation there from John. You know, he's been playing very patiently throughout the course of this tournament, and he, you know, feels the pressure here with his mulligans. And I wouldn't be surprised if he did have to make a more reckless move. Now, he doesn't even have the option.
And maybe the 4 was just referring to the size of the shark token that Sam was going to make. I mean, you know, it's probably going to be the card that wins him this game.
It does look like it. Unfortunately for John, he's stuck with triple Memory Lapse, but without the ability to either slow down his opponent or protect his own powerful plays. They're just dead in hand. Probably going to get rid of a couple of them here with this Prismari Command. He finds Velomachus Lorehold.
Oh, you know what's actually interesting is if John finds land number 7, it would actually resolve, right? Like
what Velomachus would have?
You could just cast Velomachus and attack.
You're right.
And Sam has 4 damage. Like, he wouldn't actually have a way to kill it, and he's only on 7 mana here.
Kind of funny. But he binned it, so that's not going to happen here.
Yeah. So instead choosing to go for creativity, potentially even a creativity for 2,
right?
As that allows you to play around 1 Prismari Command. But we know Sam's got 2.
It's pretty rough. Can he do it for 3? It's got a dwarf
no,
now.
he'd have to sack a treasure.
He doesn't have enough mana? Okay.
And he's so far behind here, he knows that Shark's going to make quick work of him. He's just going to try to go for it here. And Sam's patience here with that first Prismari Command, and he found the second, is going to pay off here. Because he's going to be able to counter this Indomitable Creativity by killing both treasures on John's side of the battlefield.
Yeah, you're really getting a chance to see Sam Pardee understand the pressures that his opponents are under, and then like a boa constrictor, just slowly squeeze the life out of him. Nothing brash here. He's left himself the options to fully disrupt a potential combo turn. And when you look at John, you think, okay, well then if you're worried about that, just don't go for it. That doesn't work either. He's getting clocked for 5 damage a turn right now, and it's going to be over in just a couple of turns, so John simply cannot sit here and do nothing. Here it comes. Indomitable Creativity. He looks like he's just going to target the 1/1.
Interesting.
Giving him access to a lapse.
Yep. Does give him access to a lapse, but keep in mind, I mean, Sam has, again, 2 commands, right?
Right.
So this is going to get lapsed, and Sam's just going to command again, and John's going to be a very, very sad camper.
That's right. He's going to have double memory lapse facing down a board state that he is behind on. And we all know that that's the weakness of counter spells. They can help protect what you have. They can even help protect you from making a big play. But unfortunately, once something's on the battlefield, they don't do anything anymore. And they're going to rot in his hand as we see the trap sprung here by Sam Pardee, taking out that token in response. Yeah, sure, this Prismari command can go back on top of my library. Not a problem. And this thing could be over very quickly. In fact, just 2 turns, 5-10 plus 2 from the command would be GG.
Yeah.
And there's a memory lapse off the top, too. That has to be what he wanted to see.
Right. Well, and also the creativity, right? You're just going to Velomachus now.
Oh, that too, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good,
Minor
too.
details. So he's going to be able to attack for 9 here. So a Prismari command or...
Yeah, funny enough, with the land,
like
he could just do both. He could have just Prismari commanded and...
Right. He probably should have just kept the land.
Yeah.
And not kept the expressive iteration in hand.
It looks like he's going to take the slower route here. Just crunch for 5.
Did he discard both Velomachus?
Could be. I don't believe so, but...
Yeah, that's interesting.
He could also just feel like he's pretty bulletproof here. He's got memory lapse and Prismari command. It's hard to imagine a sequence that John could do here that really matters. And with Prismari command in his hand, he has the game as well.
Right. I think if Sam kept the land, he would have just gone for it because he had lethal, right? But given that he didn't.
He says, well, I've got my bases covered. And that's a quick game number 1 going to Sam Pardee. Boy, this thing could be over very quickly here. If he wins the next game, we're done. We have a champion, and John's going to have to settle for second. So John is well and truly up against it now. He has 0 wiggle room left. He's got to win back-to-back games just to force a third and deciding match. This is big stress now on John, and he's got to get himself together, hopefully get a really good draw here and fight back.
Yeah, and as you can see, I mean, from both sides, something like 13 cards being sideboarded and everything but Anger of the Gods basically coming in here for Sam Pardee.
Okay, let's take a look at the openers. This could be the opener that decides the tournament. Is it a 5-lander with a Mystical Dispute and a Shark Typhoon? That's a quick keep there from Sam.
Lands in a Shark Typhoon.
What do you make of John's hand?
John's hand... also great, right? You have Into the Royal to deal with opposing commence the endgames in Shark Typhoons. You have the Memory Lapse, and you have your own Shark Typhoon. And again, John committed to the plan of choosing to go on the draw, is on the draw again here for game number 2.
Okay. Sam having to give up a little bit of Dwarven Mine equity here by going to get an island first and then playing a tapped mine second, but eventually he'll get a 1-1 out of the deal.
Right.
May just go for passage here and then chain a couple of mines into 1-1s. Those actually have had an effect on the game beyond the combo. As we know, post-board, the combo's not a factor, but the little 1-1s actually matter. You know, sometimes they block an army token. Sometimes they get in for a reasonable amount of damage and change the combat math a little bit.
Yeah, they end up getting very, very annoying. And it's kind of interesting if you're on Sam's side. Like, you want to start making 1-1s with the Dwarven Mine, but you really want to get a second blue source.
Mm-hmm.
Or just draw it.
Or just cold draw one off the top.
I believe that's the second island in his deck, so.
There we go. The other island, if you will. And you are correct about that, Paul. Here, though, is a Shark Typhoon now for John. Yeah. It's only a 2-2, but he's got a little pressure on the board now.
But look at that. I mean, he's got another Typhoon into commence the endgame, so Sam's going to have to fight through a lot here.
That is a lot of business for John. He's seeing the exact type of cards that you want to see in these sideboarded games. These uncounterable threats that also draw you cards are the name of the game, and a lot of times it comes down to who can resolve more of them, and right now John's the one in the driver's seat for that.
Yeah, I mean, Sam's only got this one Shark Typhoon, but, you know, he's going to get a couple of draws. And I don't think he's in a position to be conservative with this Shark Typhoon.
Right, and a 3-3 is good here. It does blank the other Shark and the 1-1s potentially. Ooh, Mystics Mastery, okay. And there's a Memory Lapse. Is he going to go for something here? What is this? Oh, he only has Shark Typhoon in the yard? Okay, well, doesn't have a
so
lot
we're
of
probably
options,
going to see a discarded Magma Opus with double lapse. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, normally you would think that that's good, right? It's like, hey, I got a bunch of counter spells. But guess what? Sideboarded games don't necessarily play out that way anymore.
That's right. It's more about protecting your own spells because you can't counter the stuff that they're doing. But here it is, a big commence the end game. It's a 7-7 for John.
And this time, John actually got more aggressive, right? He actually sacrificed that treasure token to put this big army token into play instead of cycling Shark Typhoon.
Good for him. That is paying off for him right now because he is applying huge pressure to Sam Pardee. Now he's put, what, 7, 8, 11 power on the board? Ooh, there's a Time Warp. Another Dwarven Mine here, again, can block the 7-7. We mentioned it before, but they can actually be relevant.
Yeah, I wonder if Sam wants to just kind of go with that, just to kind of...
With the warp?
With the warp. Mm-hmm. Although, I feel like if you wanted to go with that, you might want to just cast it first, but maybe he wants John to tap out for a Shark Typhoon to kind of clear it away and guarantee resolving your Time Warp.
Yeah,
that could have been a thing.
Looks like he's going to go for Mastery on Opus instead.
Yeah, and this is going to resolve as Sam does have double memory lapse here to John's 1 memory lapse. Even if John chose to cycle Shark Typhoon to draw the memory lapse again, he doesn't have enough blue sources to cast 2 memory lapses and cycle.
You can go back to that attack before doing this as well and see, well, if John wants to make a 4-4 Shark and eat the 3-3, then the Opus would help clean up that mess really well. In the meantime, it is scheduled to kill 3 creatures on board, but I have to say, the 7-7's really the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Sam at this point doesn't really have any other lines here. I mean, he's gonna need to fight and try to resolve this Magma Opus, draw some cards, kill some of those small threats. That's his way to kind of win this game.
Right, because this is what these memory lapses are for. You have to give up on the idea that they're going to be able to counter the majority of the relevant spells coming from your opponent here post-board. That's not what this is about anymore. But they still have utility.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't counter the 6 uncountable threats, but it does counter everything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, including Mystics' Mastery, Magma Opus, that kind of stuff. In this case, though, okay, he found another Mastery and passes the turn back. He's at 13 life. That's a 2-turn clock. And this is a Fry for the 4-4.
And this forces a chump block here. Right?
Probably so, yeah. Get it while the getting's good.
I mean, he also has to be concerned about a second commence, right?
Definitely.
If that happens, you're just dead.
Let's see, so it'd be 6, it would be 13, exactly lethal.
And like, what better block are you going to get later, right? I don't see a better block, so.
Well, Sam's an aggro player. I mean, he's probably looking at that. Ooh, commence the end game. How big will that be?
This is interesting
7-7 also?
Because Sam, basically, because of the commence the end game, doesn't want to play a land, right?
Right.
He wants to make a 7-7. However, I mean, look at John's hand. It's completely loaded. John's going to be so far ahead here if Sam passes, is John's going to be able to make a Shark, and he has 2 bounce spells here.
So Sam's trying to decide now if he would like to time warp and then also have to sack his treasure to protect it with memory lapse because he knows about memory lapse in hand from John.
Right, and keep in mind, this time around, John does have the ability, if he really wanted to, it would be a big sacrifice, but he could cycle Shark Typhoon and redraw the memory lapse.
Oh, just straight up cycle it for 0, or would it be 1-1?
He could cycle it for 1, and Sam can't fight back, right? So you're gonna be able to memory lapse this, and then you get a turn where you have a 7-7 and a 1-1 in play.
Right. You have outs to just win. You have time warp. You have another commence.
Right, but you would be down to just a. You would and you have 2 bounce spells as well.
Yes. Strangely tempting. Let's see if John goes for it. It's just going to be blink of an eye. That's going to take out the Shark, but that means the time warp's going to resolve.
But Sam could overload Mizzix's Mastery here, right?
Oh, wow. The shields are down now for John.
Yeah.
He only has
Oh,
one
no
red
land.
mana, but he didn't hit a land?
He didn't hit a land off the Brainstorm. I think Sam wanted a little extra value. If he just hits a land with Brainstorm, you can Brainstorm in addition to all the other spells in Sam Pardee's graveyard, including the very important Time Warp. This is huge. Oh, this is a really, really big miss. I don't know if it was necessary. I don't know what's in Sam's graveyard, but it's possible that you didn't need that little extra bit of value, right? It's hard to say, but for example, if Sam already has a Time Warp and a Magma Opus, by casting the Brainstorm, you are leaving yourself potentially vulnerable to just not finding a land.
Okay, well, he's going to have to settle for Mizzix's Mastery. It looks like there was no Magma Opus.
Oh, just the Time Warp.
It was just the Time Warp anyway, so he absolutely had the wiggle room there. So he's going to go for that and try to accrue some advantage here. He has Perilous Voyage to take care of the token. He has his own Commence the Endgame, which is actually kind of getting worse by the moment as he empties out his hand, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and keep
and
in mind,
he missed on land again here. I guess he already played one, but still.
Yeah, so this Perilous Voyage is just going to get him one card, unfortunately. Probably Memory Lapse?
Dispute Lapse? Yeah. Yeah, he likes the cards in his hand. I would think that Prismari Command would be last on the list, and it's just a question of which counter do you want to have access to.
Right, and you know he's going to run out this Perilous Voyage on his turn, as you do not want to get countered. Interesting, okay. Opting for the Mystical Dispute instead as a way to counter Overloaded Mizzix's Mastery and hardcast Magma Opus.
There's another Commence the Endgame that Sam can scry to the top of his library.
And wow, look, Sam actually...
wow, so he can do both now?
Keeping land so he can actually go Commence and still have Dispute up if John goes Magma Opus in response to your Commence the Endgame.
That's right.
That's why he's going for this, as John is at that crucial 8 mana here.
Interestingly, this Commence is fine. It'll make a 3/3. That's not too bad.
That is true. And John now debating whether or not he wants to go for Into the Royal. Ooh, a second Mystical Dispute.
I wonder if he could actually nab that into the Royal now, depending on if John goes for... Let's see, he'll have 6 mana left over if he doesn't kick it.
Yeah, this is really interesting here. So John has a couple of options. He can go for a cycle, but that's, I think, a little too risky here, right? You can go for the no block. And John...
This is still a no block scenario, right? It will be an 8/8?
Right, and John, I mean, you probably just want to let this happen first and then go for the bounce. I don't, and I look, if to play around double Mystical Dispute, you might not kick this.
You have to not kick it to play around Dispute.
If you don't kick it, you get to play around double Mystical Dispute, which is exactly what Sam Pardee has in hand.
Now you don't die, right? Even like you go to 1.
Yeah, but I mean, look, every Magic player wants to draw a card off into the Royal. Let's be real here. But look at this disciplined
Really
play here from John Girardeau. Really, really big, huge.
Really smart play from John. That could have been the difference here in this potentially deciding game. Let's see what happens. Now these players are both at similar life totals, and look who's ahead. It's John. You see that grimace there from Sam Pardee because he knows he has no threats left.
None. And with double Memory Lapse, I mean, looking pretty good here to go for a Mizzix's Mastery. I believe there's a Magma Opus in John's graveyard. When a game goes this long, I just kind of assume that there's one in there, but...
Yeah. Oh, that was a really heads-up play there from John.
Yeah.
And you're right, there's the Opus.
Yeah, and we're gonna see the Opus, cast the Opus, and Sam's gonna go Dispute. John, if he wants to play around double Dispute, actually has to go for Memory Lapse instead of paying for Dispute.
Right.
So that he can Memory Lapse the second Dispute or a potential follow-up Memory Lapse.
But that's such a nice thing for John because putting a Mystical Dispute on top of the library for Sam here is just unacceptable. Right?
Yeah.
It means he's just drawing nothing. So John just has to go laps.
This does give Sam hope, right?
An out.
John will be tapped out, and Sam could draw Mizzix's Mastery off the top. We've already seen it happen before.
There's a time warp off the top, so a little more hope.
And look, John actually choosing not to fight it.
Crazy.
Recognizing that the way that I lose this game is Mizzix's Mastery. I already have the threat that can win me the game, so it's on you to answer my shark.
That's right. Really heads up play here by John down the stretch here in this second game. And if Sam doesn't, I don't even know what Sam can find. I guess it's just over.
Shark?
A shark, a bigger shark, sure.
Yep.
Here's Expressive Iteration.
Could memory lapse this. Clearly,
Yeah.
Sam just drew this as the card for his turn, right? You're
That's
not
right.
sandbagging iteration.
Really great play there by John
Wow.
Girardeau, and he picks up the win. It looked like Sam might have it. That would have been the championship in his favor, but John played beautifully down the stretch and forces a game 3 here in our second match. John, again, can't lose a game. He's got to win this next one to force the next match, but wow, if he keeps playing like that, I like his chances.
Oh, wow. Yeah, really, really well played here by John. Was it ahead enough to recognize that the way that he can potentially lose was double dispute and beautifully played around it? Or dispute plus memory lapse. That could have also done it, right? Because he had access to 4 mana. If you get disputed, you would have to pay for the 3, then memory lapse would resolve.
Okay, game 3 incoming now. The pressure very much on both players. Sam looking to close things out right now and not having to brave it into a third and deciding match. John, he doesn't have another choice. How do the hands look?
I mean, great hand here for Sam. Has that commence the end game. Probably the best card in this matchup, right? It's unlike Shark Typhoon. It gets you ahead on 2 cards, not just 1.
No interaction here from John.
Yeah, and that's big too. John not having a mystical dispute here to kind of slow this down. I mean, everything is working here for Sam. Found the mystical dispute here. Has the commence the end game. Has mana. Can Prismari command for a treasure to accelerate the process of the commence the end game if he really wants.
John's just going to say land go after making a treasure. Looks like the same thing here for Sam Pardee, land go. There's an end step play here, though, from John. He's got Prismari command. He'd like to draw 2 cards, discard 2, and make another treasure token, getting himself ahead on land, even though he's on the draw here.
Yeah, and might be tempting to go for mystical dispute, but Sam actually choosing to hold on to this and save it for something else, as it is his lone counterspell in his hand.
Yeah, he's going to get to do the Prismari command thing himself.
Yeah, he's going for the to get the mana edge back here, right? He's like, look, you're making a bunch of treasures. I'm going to kill your treasure and get a treasure for myself.
That's right. This is a tug of war as far as mana goes. And it's really important because if you have the right hand, you can build up to a game-winning play and protect it. And if you're the first one to do it, it's over.
Right.
There's a Perilous Voyage, so that'll give him an answer. Now, nothing on board yet, or in hand for John to start making big tokens, but that Voyage will cover the first base of that. There's a Time Warp off the top now for John, who's scheduled to miss a land drop, so I'm sure we'll see him get through the library one way or the other.
I think he has a dwarf in mind that he's floating around somewhere.
You're right. He had pulled it out of his hand. Good eye there, Paul. So land drop hit and a 1/1 on the battlefield, but this is where the fun begins here for Sam Pardee because he's just going to slam commence the end game.
Yeah, but
and this thing's going to be huge. It's a 7/7.
Yeah, but this is getting into the roiled immediately. And this time around, given that John doesn't have a counterspell, we're drawing a card here.
There you go. A little right back at you. Now, Sam can't be super sad about that, though, because he did get 2 cards out of the deal as well.
He could also Mizzix's Mastery commence the endgame.
Oh, that's sweet.
And he does have Mystical Dispute backup.
He decided against it. Here's a brainstorm now for John. So as is often the case, the players are jockeying for position. There's been a few volleys sent out, but they've been batted back, at least thus far. John's going to resolve a brainstorm here and see what he wants to do.
Yeah, and things slowing down a bit here as no token creators here to be made.
Yeah, both of them just desperately looking for Shark Typhoons and commence the end games to get something going. And we're going to see Prismari Command try to find those here for Pardee. He's going to dig through his library and see what he can find.
And is he going for the loot option here, or is he going to kill a treasure?
Yeah, that's the interesting question. He actually originally selected loot plus I get a treasure, but I think he looked at the board and said, you still have another treasure hanging out.
Yeah. I mean, John treats these treasures as like a full card by themselves. So
he does. They're very precious.
Right. So going for the destruction here seems pretty good.
Okay, a Triome and a Magma Opus off the top. He already had one in his hand as well.
Yeah, this is tough, and this is also kind of a situation where you see Prismari Command, and we talk about how good it is, but after sideboarded games where all your cards are good, when you're using the mode of draw 2, discard 2, it doesn't even feel like it's that great, right?
I agree.
mean, you're kind of down a card. Is it time to commence?
Could be.
Cannot be countered, which then forces John to actually memory lapse the Mizzix's Mastery, meaning that Sam could go for it again next turn, right? Typically, the play is memory lapse whatever gets cast off the Mizzix's Mastery, but in this instance, because it can't be countered, you need to counter the Mizzix's Mastery itself.
I'm curious, does Sam fight here? I mean, oftentimes you're like, well, I got to leave up my counter spells in case they do something big. Well, newsflash, a lot of their big stuff's uncounterable anyway. Do you just have a battle here?
I don't think so. I mean, you could, but it is pretty risky here as I mean, John now can create a treasure off Magma Opus and can overload Mizzix's Mastery next turn.
Oh boy.
Right? And Sam only has the Triome in play. He doesn't have the mana to counter an overloaded Mizzix's Mastery. So we're going to see Brainstorm plus a Magma Opus at least being cast by this Mizzix's Mastery.
Oh boy. So a 6/6 on battlefield now for Sam Pardee, but the shields are down. And look at this. He's going to actually fight over a Brainstorm here as well.
We need a graveyard check here on Mr. John Girardeau. We got to see what kind of action he's working with here. I mean,
here it is. Magma Opus.
Double Opus.
Double Opus. That's a lot. That's
going to kill the
game.
6/6 that's in play. He also just has a bounce spell, so he can just bounce the 6/6, draw 4 cards, deal 8 damage to Sam, and take a look at Sam's hand. He doesn't have a Mastery.
That's right. Boy, Sam Pardee leaving the door open, and John's going to come bashing right through, it looks like. It doesn't win him the game on the spot. It's not one of those overloaded Mizzix's Masteries where it's like, okay, we're just done here. But boy, that's a lot of advantage.
I mean, look, if you're John's side of the board, it's like my opponent's got 5 cards in hand, they're tapped out. I mean, if you want to kind of go longer, and they have a 6/6 in play, you have to go for it here. There's simply just no choice, right? Like, how are you going to win this game if you don't go for it this turn when your opponent's tapped out?
That's right. This is the window, and here we go. You see that Sam Pardee is in distress, as it is going to be pretty ugly for him. So many cards are going to go into the hand of John here, and even 8 damage is going to happen as well.
Look at all these cards. That's a dead token.
Dead token, double Brainstorm for cards, double Magma Opus.
He's going to draw 6 cards?
Yep, he sure is. Get to throw around 8 damage. The only good news here for Sam is that there isn't any Time Warp in there, so that he doesn't get to untap and immediately capitalize off of all this stuff. But the window is closing rapidly here on one Sam Pardee in our second match. Although I will say, commence the endgame into hand, but, curate, okay. Memory lapse is good. Here's Brainstorm, though.
I mean, he just drew
Well,
6 cards and
this is-
brainstorm twice.
This is the really annoying part, is that he gets to really craft this hand because he actually drew a huge number of lands here, but he's able to brainstorm and draw and discard through them and even get in for 1. Here's Perilous Voyage on my upkeep. That way the scry will actually help me find something.
Sam really
says
wants
Sam.
a time warp here to give him time, to give him the ability to brainstorm time warp, right? And then potentially find time warp into his own Mizzix's Mastery.
Yep. Oh, there's a time warp. He found a time warp and a Mizzix's Mastery all off of a brainstorm.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Okay, so he's gonna time warp, and next turn he's gonna be able to Mizzix's Mastery. He's gonna have what?
Oh my God, and he's getting the time warp back plus the other stuff. Can he actually get the Magma Opus in the yard and still
I don't
kick
think
it?
so. I don't think so. He can brainstorm here. He can brainstorm.
He can get the Opus
Oh, he
in
can.
too.
Right. He has 9 mana. This just costs 1 mana. Oh my goodness.
Right back at you, says Sam Pardee.
Jeez.
A huge overloaded Mizzix's Mastery. Does he have the win here? He just put his hands up in the air.
Well, he thought he was dead. I mean, now we have a game, right?
Seriously. And that's a good game coming in. Unbelievable.
Good
John
game.
Girardot just gave him the good game. He must
Is it
have
really
the win
game?
here.
Oh, there's a time warp. There's
And
a time
that
warp.
is going to do it. Sam
Oh my
Pardee is your Strixhaven Championship winner. Congratulations,
Holy
Sam.
cow.
He has made it to the finals before. He lost that time to Paulo Vitor. He does not lose this time. It's party time. Sam Pardee's your champion.